Walking with My Eyes Open by Kill Despair. Chapter 2. Every step along the way. Step 2. Research. Once the phenomenon has been observed and the research question formed, the next stage is examining any prior existing knowledge and creating testable hypotheses. On the morning of January 5th, 5740, Senkuu woke up for the first time to a painful cough and black nightshade petals. He had one conscious thought, and that was what he chose to focus on. But before his conscious mind came into play, he had 4 unconscious reactions too. The first was confusion, which was fair since last time he checked, he didn't make a habit of eating mildly poisonous plants for dinner, and if he did, would at least boil them down first to clean out the toxins, none of which would result in perfectly formed petals. The second source of confusion was a painful burning that traveled down from his neck into his chest and ended in his gut. Senkuu put a hand on his neck, still muddled from sleep, and what he was vaguely considering might be esophagitis. Petals, coughing, black nightshade, inflamed esophagus. Ah! The confusion was quickly burned away as a new emotion took its place. There is a catch when plotting to make a person fall out of love with you, especially when that person was Senkuu. In fact, there were a few catches. Gen wondered if 2 catch-22s made a catch-44. First was that Gen couldn't actually risk damaging his relationship with Senkuu so badly that they wouldn't be able to work together in the future. Gen liked living in the kingdom of science. It had indoor heating and didn't have a hunt wild boar like was liable in the Empire of Might. Further, Gen would not so humbly claim that Ishigami Village had benefited greatly from having his mentalist skills on their side and would, by all reasoning, continue to do so, especially as they prepared for war. All of which meant it would be rather unfortunate if Gen irritated Senkuu so badly that he kicked him out of the village, life-saving benefit or not. Second, the most likely thing to convince Senkuu that Gen was absolutely the worst possible person to be in love with was to impede the thing Senkuu held most precious. Science! But not only did actively sabotaging science have a high chance of the village actually setting out to murder him, the entire thing would be ridiculously counterproductive. Senku's current scientific projects were 1. Creating phones to save their lives from Sukusa. 2. Creating a cure to save his life from death by 1,000 flowers. Both of which Gen was very, very invested in coming true. So, Gen had to somehow find a way to get Senkuu to fall out of love with him that wouldn't cause him to hate Gen's guts and or be completely convinced of Gen's unsuitability via disregard of science. Then there was the last thing. It wasn't a catch, per se, but Gen also had to admit there was a reasonable chance Senkuu was already aware of his plan, having calculated it as the next most likely maneuver after the failed love confession last night. In considering all of this, Gen had realized there was only one absolutely terrifying thing he could possibly do. The one thing that went completely counter to everything he'd ever done before, but would undoubtedly kill any possible love-like feelings in the shortest time possible. Gen was going to be completely and utterly himself. Since shaping the metal chimneys and gathering the coal needed to heat every hut in the village took time and many hands, Gen had every belief that Senkuu was correct in his assumption the lab would be perfectly empty and ready for their more specialized science project. He still yawned as he came, not putting the effort into his normal dramatic entrances. Right now, it paid to be as bare bones as possible. Good morning, Senkuu-chan. Gen slid on to the lab table again, which was really Senku's fault for not having other decent places to sit. And what are we starting with today? I take it you already have some idea. Senkuu smirked, pulling at his notebook. Butter. I've got a list. Of course you do. Gen rolled his eyes. Okay, fine, but first give me the rundown on this Hanahaki disease. The only things I know about it are urban legends. That's because basically that's all doctors knew about it until the cases started getting more frequent. Senkuu glanced down at his notes. Even then, it's still mostly a total mystery, though.
Physical illness that's based on one of the most subjective emotional states in the brain. Fascinating. What we do know about it already is that it starts with flowers taking root in the patient's stomach. I thought it was lungs, Get interrupted. Senkuu shook his head. Not common misconception because of the coughing, but if it grew in the lungs, that wouldn't explain why some patients exhibit vomiting like they do. He rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, some respiratory illnesses do result in vomiting, pneumonia, of course, but the specific makeup points to the digestive systems due to... Senkuu wrinkled his nose. Yeah, trust me, you don't really want to hear the whys on this part. It's the stomach, alright? I'll believe you, Gang grimaced. Which actually is even more weird in a way, Senkuu said, because plants have grown naturally in people's lungs before. There was a case with a pea plant in America back before the petrification. The stomach, however, isn't just made of tissue. The stomach acids alone should kill the plant before it sprouts, let alone be able to nurture it until it's strong enough to tear the lining.
Has anyone ever told you that you say terrible things way too naturally? Gan asked.
Senkuu snorted. This is important. It means that there's something in the disease that's altering the stomach's chemical makeup, weakening the acids and providing nutrients to the plant.
He tapped his makeshift pencil against the notebook.
Which that, along with the clearly cognitive element, means that the true root of the illness probably has something to do with the signals the brain's sending the stomach.
Gen took a moment just to be somewhat impressed by the sheer amount of information Senkuu was able to pull together in what had to be a few days max.
So, block the signal, stop the illness,
Gen surmised. Senkuu sighed.
It's not going to be that easy. First, we don't even know what specifically is causing the distorted orders from the brain. And on top of that, monitoring the messages the brain puts out is tricky and still fairly incomplete. Even if it wasn't, we don't have the materials I need to build an MRI or an EEG, and even our old times tech hadn't come up with a way to completely check a living brain's chemical imbalance.
His eyes flickered up to Ken.
Plus, I don't guess you became a psychiatrist without telling me, did you?
Gen held out empty hands.
Unfortunately, I was more interested in the theory side rather than pharmaceuticals.
Senkuu nodded.
Yeah, and I focused more on the other medical fields, which means I know jack shit about how to make a psychiatric drug. He rolled his shoulders. I'm not actually a chemist, of course.
Gen stared at him.
What?
Senkuu asked.
You made antibiotics from rocks,
Gen said flatly.
Yeah? So?
Senkuu crossed his arms in what on other people might be labeled as defensive. Possibly even a pout.
I needed to know some chemistry if I was going to build a functional rocket. Expanding it to basic medicine was just logical. Chemistry was mostly a hobby.
He caught Ken's look.
Okay, an extensive hobby that apparently got a lot more use than I was expecting. Whatever, I'm still mainly an astrophysicist.
Sure, Senkuu-chan, Gen said in a tone that was very clearly false appeasement.
You're definitely, totally not a chemist.
Senkuu glared at him.
Gen smiled, beatific. Anyway, Senkuu said, I think we'll have better luck focusing on the stomach side, but before that, there's more questions we need to answer. Right now, the disease only has one known treatment.
Wait! Gen nearly jumped off the table. There's already a cure, and you're just now mentioning it?
Senkuu huffed. Because it's a treatment, not cure, and it's not going to work for me.
Why not?
Because the only known treatment is surgery that removes the plant out by its roots.
Senkuu answered.
And joke all you want about being a chemist, but I'm definitely not a surgeon. Especially one skilled or insane enough to operate on myself while I'm conscious. No one else in the village quite has the skills for experimental surgery, even if we were able to create a sterile environment.
He muttered the last bit under his breath.
Fuck, we really need to depetrify some more doctors.
Ah, Gen said, leaning back in his spot. Senkuu throws in a final caveat almost casually, shoulders unconsciously tense in a way that said it wasn't.
And with surgery, there's the added side effect that a predominant amount of patients report losing their ability to feel love, which is another interesting symptom, actually, since it means the stomach sends input about the illness back to the brain.
Gen hummed, writing out the last science bit until Senkuu looked down at his notebook. This question was better when they weren't facing each other.
Don't take this the wrong way, Senkuu-chan, but I never thought of you as the romantic type that would risk losing your life just so you could fall in love again. After all the hassle this has turned out to be, I think you'd appreciate it, actually.
Senkuu didn't look up, staying silent for long enough that Gen started to wonder if he should break it out of kindness. Gen didn't, because Gen had decided to be his true self, and Gen's true self wasn't the type that prioritized kindness over useful knowledge. He didn't have to debate for much longer anyway. Senkuu ran a thumb along the notebook edges.
It's not just romantic love that's lost.
Gen blinked. Senkuu didn't expand.
So since we're not going to find a cure there, Senkuu continued, there's 3 parts I want to test most.
He raised a finger for each.
Susceptibility, behavior that progresses the illness, and behaviors that slow it down. Once we have estimated guesses on all of those, we can move on to figuring out how to cure this. Susceptibility.
Gen tilted his head.
Isn't that one obvious already? It's unrequited love, right?
Gen wondered if he should stop mentioning the unrequited part, or if that was going to make the disease worse. It was essentially dying of a broken heart, right? Bringing up Gen's own lack of feelings probably didn't help. Senkuu didn't look affected at all, instead of grinning.
That's assuming the feeling of unrequited love or whatever is so easily quantified from a biological sense. It's definitely not, by the way. But I get what you mean. Some questions, then. The gun widened. If it's only because of unrequited love, then why did it only pop up consistently about a decade ago in our time? And why is it not all cases of unrequited love? What makes me different than Daiju? He's certainly pined about it forever without confessing, or grow. When you get down to it, probably everyone's had some kind of crush they didn't talk about. So why isn't everyone getting sick? For that matter, why does the disease read love different from infatuation?
Gen thought about it and gave up blank.
All right, I concede your case, he said. Why do I have the feeling you already have a theory? Maybe 1 or 2.
Senkuu shrugged.
But they're the type that are going to be easier to disprove rather than prove. At least with our current technology. Now, to be honest, the real thing that's bugging me is the flower.
Gen raised an eyebrow.
Yes, I can imagine, since you're the one who's coughing them up, and they're apparently trying to split you in half.
Senkuu waved him off.
No, not that. How am I not surprised? I mean the whole symbolic thing.
Senkuu said.
Why does my digestive system care that black nightshade is your flower? Better yet, how does it care? How does it know?
Gen thought. Again. And failed.
Senkuu-chan! Gen moaned. It's too early for me to be thinking this hard, especially about the floral preferences of intestines. Technically, the intestines... Senkuu-chan! Gen interrupted. Bodily technicalities aside, I suppose since you were so kind about telling me your plans for handling this, I should open up about mine. That's fair and all. Your plan.
Senkuu echoed. Gen nodded amicably.
Yes, my plan.
Fuck. Senkuu made a face.
I thought you'd given up on the stupid, overdramatic confession stuff. Are you trying to make me gag mentalist? Brave words from the Hanahaki victim, Gen remarked. But point taken. No, I've decided to swap tactics. To what? Simple.
Gen's grin was wide and far too sharp for smiling.
I'm going to convince you to fall out of love with me.
Senkuu stared at him. Gen continued to smile. Finally, Senkuu gave a short laugh, rolling his eyes.
That fast, huh? Oh, undoubtedly. I don't think people fall out of love that easily, mentalist,
Senkuu said confidently. And Gen did laugh this time, wild and mean.
Senkuu-chan, oh, Senkuu-chan.
He twisted the name along the air, batting his eyes.
I never took you for the innocent one. People fall out of love all the time. Crushes, marriages, it doesn't matter. Enough time into feeling sour until the cute little things they used to find are the same ones they can't get away from fast enough. Gen hummed. Honestly, the real marvel isn't how to fall out of love. It's how anyone manages to stay in it.
Senkuu raised a brow.
Didn't think you'd be the one cynical about relationships. Of course I am.
Gen waved a hand like a partner trick.
Feelings are the flightiest, most malleable things in the universe. Take it from my mentalist. Either way, Senkuu said, the trick doesn't work as well when you tell me what you're planning beforehand. No trick. Gen corrects. The opposite of a trick, actually. I can promise you, Senkuu-chan, for as long as this takes, I'm going to be the truest version of me I can possibly be. And that's all it'll take?
Senkuu sounded amused. Gen let him be. Senkuu may know the hard sciences, but Gen knew people. Falling out of love, the easiest, most painful thing on the planet.
Yep, that's all it'll take, Gen promises. Senkuu-chan, strange as it sounds, tons of infatuations fade from knowing a person more, not less. The mind's powerful in its perception, but once that's broken, I'm afraid love doesn't have much to go on.
Senkuu shook his head, still smiling, and not looking like he believed a word of it.
Such a cynic mentalist. Maybe, Gen agreed, but a correct one. And one who's only here because I know which of our plans is going to save your life faster. You'd be here anyway, Senkuu said, utterly self-assured. Not a millimeter chance you'd let me die without helping find a cure. No, you're right, I wouldn't, Gen allowed. But you also can't stop me from helping in my own way, which means, dear Senkuu-chan, we're at an impasse.
Senkuu grinned.
Science versus mentalism, then. If you wanted to phrase it like that. Gen stuck out a hand. Sure, a bet on who can cure you faster.
Senkuu shook it.
Sounds like a race.
Funnily enough, Gen didn't actually see Senkuu much of the week after that on account of actually and literally dying! Okay, maybe not literally. Metaphorically, emotionally, mentally, but probably even spiritually. On all of those fronts, Gen might as well be 6 feet under already. He pouted miserably, continuing to fold the magnesium batteries. The 800 magnesium batteries! There was no amount of cheerful work songs that could make that better. Gen was practically wishing his fingers would give up the ghost to dry up and fall off. If he wasn't half sure Senkuu would just sew them back on, like some kind of weird Frankenstein hand model. And Gen liked his hands. Screw the Hanahaki disease. Gen was going to kill Senkuu himself. He legitimately could not believe there weren't other less mind-numbing tasks in the village that he could help on. He'd even take glass blowing with Katsuki right now. Beside him, Ruri was still humming along happily, but Ruri might be an actual angel, so Gen wasn't bothering to hold himself to her standards. She caught his paws and looked up herself. And you used to have these batteries back in your old world? Yes. Gen held up the one in his hand. Though admittedly I have no idea what's the difference between these magnesium ones and the acid ones Senkuu hooked up to the water generator. Ruri nodded, looking thoughtful. When I was growing up, I always believed that our 100 tales held the greatest achievements of all mankind. To be fair, Gen said, being able to maintain the level of detail you had over 3,000 years is fairly impressive, even for oral histories. Ruri smiled. Thank you. I am grateful for being able to keep our village history, but I am even more grateful to now see how much it's expanding. She shook her head. I never thought I'd live this long anyway, and now to see all this, to listen to you tell of what used to be. She reached out and squeezed his hand. I am glad that both you and Senkuu found our village again. And it's selfish, but I'm even more glad I am the priestess that got to see it. Gen couldn't help but smile back, holding up his hands. Don't speak too soon, sweet priestess. We still don't know if we'll live long enough to finish these batteries. All 800 of them. Ruri laughed before sobering. I'm sorry, though. Sometimes I forget that for all the villages discovering this for the first time, this is all what you've lost. I'm sure it must be lonely for you and Senkuu, being the only ones in the village who remember your old world. He shrugged. It's not too bad. What Gen didn't say is that he didn't have much in the old world to miss anyway. Not that wasn't replaceable, probably quicker than he expected when the Kingdom of Science really got up and running. Though for Senkuu, that was a thought, actually. Gen filed it away as Ruri reached again for his hands, frowning this time as she got a better look at the calluses and cracks. Oh, your hands really are dry. She looked up. Have you tried the poultice that Senkuu made yet? I believe he was handing it out to all the elderly and the villagers who work outside. Poultice, Gen echoed. Ruri nodded. I believe he called it hand cream. Of course he fucking did. Of course, Senkuu had apparently reinvented lotion in who knows when free time, and Gen was just finding out about it now. Gen stood up. Excuse me, it seems I have business with our village's leader and chief. Ruri grinned, looking like she wasn't at all surprised. I believe he's still working in Chrome's hut. Excellent! Gen strode with purpose all the way to Chrome's hut and knocked on the door just short of banging.
Oh, Senkuu-chan!
What? Gen took that as permission, throwing open the door and climbing inside.
A little birdie told me you made something just fascinating the other day.
Senkuu raised her brow, looking positively smug.
Mentalist, I don't know if you've noticed, but I make fascinating things every day. You're going to have to be more specific.
Gen did not hit him because Gen was a gentleman and therefore above those things, even when Senku's smirk was really, really punchable. More importantly, because punching people would crack his hand.
Lotion, Gen said bluntly. Hand it over!
Senkuu cackled, pointing him to a large bowl sitting in the corner. Gen practically dove at it, scooping out a small handful and...
bliss. You seem happy. I am happy.
Gen practically purred, grabbing another handful. It kind of smelled chemically, but who was he to complain?
You would be too if you'd been hunched over putting together batteries for the past day and a half. Tell me, Senkuu-chan, I thought you needed me for experiments. How exactly are you supposed to be working on a cure if I'm half dead by the end of the day? Oh, that was an experiment,
Senkuu said casually. Gen stopped.
What? Sure, there's tons of tasks that need doing before we can make the cell phone.
Senkuu explained.
The battery one's not the most complicated or hardest by any means, but it's 10 billion% the most mind-numbing. I was planning to set it up as a rotating station, then I thought, why not multitask? I wasn't going to do anything too crazy, but I was curious how it would affect the disease if I did something to intentionally annoy you.
Senkuu was indeed a genius, Gen thought murderously, because Gen was in fact feeling very, very annoyed right now. Senkuu, with his last stray speck of survival instinct, seemed to notice. He rolled his eyes.
Relax, mentalist. I already finished that test and got my data. I won't have any more experiments to purposefully piss you off, cross my heart, or whatever.
Proving said survival instinct was still more of a crapshoot, Senkuu then looked considering.
Though having a replication study is always... Senkuu-chan! Gen interrupted. Fine. Since we're on a timeline, I guess we can leave out replication on this one for now.
That wasn't the resounding answer Gen wanted, but it would do currently. Besides, Gen was curious.
So, was there any negative effect?
Senkuu tilted his head, coughing mildly into his hand.
Some, but not enough for me to believe I significantly accelerated the course of the disease. Don't worry, the 2 or 3 month timeline should still hold.
Fuck, Senkuu was so insane sometimes. Why even risk making the disease kill him faster? The maniac! Things like this was why Gen had his own plan. Speaking of which...
Hey, Senkuu-chan!
Gen drew up next to him.
So I was talking to Rory, while I was in danger of losing a hand for the sake of your experiments. Don't be dramatic, it was still just some batteries. And you mentioned how lonely it must be.
Gen sighed, making his tone wistful.
Being the only modern man here, I mean.
Senkuu paused to look at him.
You going somewhere with this? In fact, I am.
Gen tapped his chin.
Indulge me, won't you, Senkuu-chan? Did you have much experience with crushes back in our old world? Lots of dates? A serial heartbreaker, mayhaps?
Now Senkuu just looked annoyed.
No.
Gen wasn't all that surprised.
Any crushes at all? A few. None that were particularly noteworthy. Senkuu shrugged. This isn't one, but when I was 4, I somehow got in my head I'd married Dr. Mamoru, the first Japanese astronaut, so he could get me in JAXA. I remember being devastated when Byakuya told me he was already in his 50s by the time I was born.
Gen hid his smile in his sleeve.
That's very cute, Senkuu-chan. Shut up and get to your point. I have a theory.
Gen spread his arms wide.
Here we are, both strangers lost in a new world. The only ones that can relate to what the world used to be like and what all we lost. Put like that, it's only natural that we develop an attachment to each other.
Senkuu stared at him.
Are you really trying to go down the Stockholm Syndrome route, mentalist? Well, maybe not Stockholm Syndrome. We're missing a few key ingredients and the power structure for that.
Gen pretended to think.
Though if you keep making me make batteries, I won't lie, I might start developing very warm fuzzy feelings for Sugasa. We'll see. Most shallow men in the world,
Senkuu accused.
Why, thank you.
Gen got serious.
But it has been shown that the oxytocin system is tied to the ability to recover from stress, including traumatic events like, say, getting petrified for thousands of years and waking up in a new world. And I'm sure, as you also know, the oxytocin system is also tied to another important psychological response: bonding, attachment development, love, some would say. Missing a few other chemicals there, and by a few, I mean like 5. Sure, oxytocin's one of them.
Senkuu crossed his arms.
And you're saying this because I'm saying,
Senkuu continued as gently as he could,
that maybe we're in a world where we're both prone to search for a lost connection and attachment to our old world, for both of us, but maybe especially for someone who didn't have much interest in crushes before this. Having one now could feel exceptionally strong. Could even feel like love.
Senkuu picked at his ear.
Okay.
Gen's gentle expression dropped.
Okay, he repeated flatly. You're not even going to try to argue with me. About what?
Senkuu shrugged.
You know way more about psychology than me. For all I know, you're right, and my emotions do feel more extreme because of the whole petrification thing. I just don't see your point.
My point? Gen almost shrieked. My point is that it's not real. It's just some kind of illogical response to trauma. You're not in love with me, alright? Senkuu rolled his eyes.
Congratulations, mentalist, I'm cured.
Gen gave up and pouted.
Though, honestly, Senkuu continued, if you're going for the whole everything I feel here is a trauma reaction, I think you're overselling yourself a bit. Maybe for you, but I was already awake almost a year here before I even met you. If I was going to trauma bond with anyone, the easy choice would have been Taiju. At least I already was friends with him before all this, and we spent months just us working on the revival fluid. So really, if that's your theory, then
yes, I get it, Gen interrupted sourly. And I take it you're not having any romantic feelings about Taiju too? Senkuu snorted.
Well, reactions aren't always logical.
Gen recovered.
All feelings are illogical,
Senkuu said.
They're not supposed to be based solely on rationality. That's why humans get to make their own choices about whether they want to act on them. Feelings may get you into a relationship, but without actually thinking about what that relationship is going to take to last, of course, is going to fail. He grimaced, Dan going to his stomach. That's the biggest reason why this fucking disease sucks. It tries to take away the choice. The romantics would probably say it helps the choice along.
Gen mused. Senku's glare was withering.
Don't give me that!
Gen held up his hands in defense.
I never said I was a romantic. You should know better by now.
Senkuu upped.
I don't care what romantics say. Everybody deserves a choice. There can be tons of reasons not to confess that have nothing to do with fear. Shit, even if it is just fear keeping people from confessing, why does that mean a disease gets to decide for you instead? What if the person doesn't even want a relationship? What if it's not the right time? What if it's a person they don't want to be in love with? Like their best friend's girlfriend or their boss? What if they have other things they want to focus on? What if they don't want a relationship because they just don't? It's always supposed to be a choice. Not whether you have feelings, but whether you want to act on them. Senku's jaw shut so hard, his teeth ground. That's why we need to cure this disease. Not just stop it for me. For everyone.
Gen watched him perceptively. He saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand was clenched along the basket. For the first time, Gen actually wondered about what this disease means for Senkuu. To be blunt, the idea of Senkuu having a crush in the first place, let alone being in love, still felt pretty foreign, like a possibility Gen never thought to account for and now had trouble wrapping his brain around, even when the proof was right in front of him. The words crush and Senkuu felt so separate that Senkuu, the man that always moved based on his own plans alone, not even getting to evaluate what he wanted for himself now, seemed so strikingly and inherently wrong. Gen never even asked. He did now, leaning his chin in his hands.
What about you, Senkuu-chan? Do you actually want a relationship?
Senkuu didn't look at him.
What I want is to find a cure so I can actually answer that question without stupid flowers trying to strangle me.
Gen's lip quirked up unbidden.
Fair enough. Anyway, Senkuu stood up. Quit ditching Rory. We both need to get back to work. Gen winced. What? But I thought your experiment was over. You don't need to annoy me with batteries anymore. Yeah, so? Senkuu shrugged. We still need the batteries done. Quit complaining. You'll be done soon enough anyway. He held up the basket. Plus I got the material I need for the speakers, which means we're almost ready to get this thing up and running. With practice hiding emotions, Gen ignored the spark of excitement that ran up his back at that to actually see a phone working in a stone world. Though, admittedly, almost, in Senku's words, meant a full night of back-breaking labor for anyone else, so he probably shouldn't be too excited. He looked longingly at the large bowl of hand lotion, wondering if there was any way he could take a small bit with him without having the lotion dry up in the next few days. Here. A small glass jar tumbled through the air and Gen caught it, finding a small sealed container of lotion. Just keep it, Senkuu told him. It's an extra. I was messing around with a few oils to get rid of the chemical smell, and none of them turned out exactly great. At least if you use it, it's not a waste of materials. Senkuu grinned cockily, starting his way down the ladder. Besides, now, you don't have any excuse to complain about cracked knuckles. That should double your work, right, mentalist? Gen huffed at the door, even when he knew Senkuu couldn't see it. Curious, he brought the jar up for further examination, pulling back the cloth cover and bracing himself for an overpowering... Gen blinked. Actually, the lotion smelled fine. Lightly floral, even in a way that, yes, may never match the level of their old cosmetic stores, but was still pleasing in its own way. He closed the container, eyes going to the door. Stupid Senkuu-chan. For a stone world, it sometimes felt like time moved too fast, because it felt like no time passed at all from the exhaustion of finishing the first cell phone and Senku's crafty mention that they needed another, then to testing the first phone, then the recordings reveal, then building a record player, then finally getting to listen to the founder's recording and hearing Lillian Weinberg, the Lillian Weinberg, sing for the first time in 3,000 years. The village had decided to throw a celebration after that, though whether it was for the rediscovery of music, the finished phone, or just because, was anyone's guess. A party was all well and good, but personally, Gen had other ideas in mind. Specifically, about the one man that had slipped away though all the rest of the villagers were preoccupied. Gen found him in the observatory, not like it was any particular surprise. Senkuu was leaning beside his telescope, not even bothering to look through it, and instead staring up at the moon. "Looking for shooting stars?" Gen asked. Senkuu glanced back and shrugged. Not really. Then again, for all I know, there could be a meteor shower tonight. Our old astronomical calendars didn't really get into specific dates after the first few centuries. Or if they did, I don't remember them anymore. Gen sat beside him. Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe. What would you wish for? Gen asked, figuring it was as good of an opening as any to start this conversation. Nitric acid or an industrial-strength cutting laser. Never mind, forgot who he was talking to somehow. Gen pouted. You're the worst at this game, you know that, Senkuu-chan? Wishing on frozen rocks, hurtling through space isn't worth the time. Senkuu smirked, tilting his head back. Speaking of, you know what's a dumb thing to still be pissed about? What? Senkuu let out a low huff. Back in our old world, there's one time every year where Earth's orbit gets the closest Jupiter's. The opposition of Jupiter. Best time to see it all year, close enough I could even make out the cloud bands. Bet you had it marked on your calendar, didn't you? Gen teased. Or did you memorize it? Doesn't matter. Senkuu rolled his eyes. Opposition of Jupiter was June 10th. Petrification was the 3rd. I missed it by a week. A week! Ouch! Tell me about it. I don't think I remember much astronomical stuff, Gen admitted. He cocked his brow. Though, if you want astrology, hard pass. Gen juggled. I guess I know a few. Eclipses, blue moons. What's that comet one, the big famous one? Halley's Comet? Senkuu smirked. If it makes you feel better, Halley's orbit is still one of the rarer ones. For a human lifespan, I mean. Only comes around every 75 or so years, so we've only missed around 50. It's still around? Sure, Senkuu said easily. We still got about, let's say at least 95,000 years before it's in danger of dying out. That long? Gen moaned. And I thought 3,000 was bad. Senkuu sighed. 3,000 years is a long time. Yeah, it's got nothing on a geological age, but it doesn't mean things still aren't changing out there. He nodded up at the sky, even though our star isn't quite in the same place anymore.
Gin blinked, squinting up at the sky and wondering how Senkuu could tell in the first place.
Not to mention all the exploratory data that was lost, Senkuu grumbled. All the rovers that ended up sending readings back to nothing, the monitoring equipment that's burned or froze away by now. Entire planet surfaces could have shifted. All our information could be outdated, and we don't even know it. Yet,
Gen said softly.
Yeah, yet.
Senkuu shifted, looking up at the sky rather than Gen.
Thanks. Don't mention it.
Gen cleared his throat.
Actually, I came up here to see if you were okay.
Senkuu turned back at him.
Yeah, I'm alright. The disease wasn't that much worse than normal today, which is good too. It'd have been annoying if it was acting up when we were finally getting the phone to work. I more meant the record,
Gen clarified.
Oh.
Senkuu took a breath.
I'm fine. You don't have to be. Hearing your father's voice again, and on something he specifically left for you.
Gen shrugged.
It's alright if you're not fine, you know.
Senku's smile was a very Senkuu thing. Too dry to be called soft, and too soft to really be dry.
It's not like I didn't already know he was dead. He hesitated. When I was stuck in there, when I first got out, I thought that maybe there was a chance him and the crew had gotten petrified like everyone else when they got back to Earth, but even then, I knew the odds were.
Senkuu stopped and started again.
Anyway, I heard from Rory already months ago. The record didn't change anything. So yeah, I'm fine.
Gen didn't know if he believed him. But Senkuu clearly wanted to change the subject anyway, leaning back and rubbing at his neck.
The real part that's going to suck is breaking it to Taiju and Yuzuriha. They were pretty close to him too, especially Taiju. It was kind of crazy, actually. Dad even kept this orange sherbet ice cream in the fridge because it was Taiju's favorite.
Never mind that Dad was allergic.
Your dad was the cool dad, wasn't he?
Gen asked.
Senkuu snorted. No, but he thought he was. Definitely not cool. Why do I feel like Taiju and Yuzuriha would say different? Only because they were bribed.
But Senkuu was actually smiling again, and Gen took it as a job well done. At least until Senkuu suddenly bent over, coughing hard in his hands and shoulders jerking, and Gen was suddenly slammed right back into the reality of the situation. Right, Senkuu was dying. Would die unless they succeeded in another of Senku's impossible miracle drugs or Gen's much more likely plan of diffusing whatever Senku's body chemistry was calling love. Senkuu finally stopped coughing, hand sliding behind his back before Gen could see what was there, not that he couldn't already guess.
I think that was just residual from earlier, not anything we did,
Senkuu said, voice markedly even.
Our day's work probably just irritated it more.
Gen eyed him pointedly.
Then why not take a break?
Senkuu laughed.
Yeah, I don't think any of us can afford to do much of that right now, not with Tsukasa coming.
He paused before adding,
Besides, if I looked too out of it, Chrome or Kohaku would definitely notice something was up.
About that, Gen said.
Are you sure you don't want to tell the rest of the village?
Senkuu sighed.
I don't really see how it would help. No offense to Chrome or the rest of them. No offense to Chrome or the rest of them, but they only got access to most of this science a few months ago. They're learning. Realistically, I think the only one who's got a chance of figuring out the medicine behind this is me. That I'm not arguing, Gen frowned. I mean, are you sure you don't want to tell them because this is going to get worse and probably soon? Not to mention there's always a slim chance we don't figure this out in time and, well...
He closed his eyes and breathed before opening them again.
It's your choice and I'll respect whatever you choose, but... The point is, if this doesn't work out, the village would want to know. To be there for you, a few of them especially, Chrome and Kohaku included.
Senkuu stayed quiet.
No,
he said finally.
I don't want to tell them.
Gen swallowed before nodding.
Then we won't.
And he hoped they wouldn't hate him for it. Senkuu cleared his throat before smirking, a stilted copy of what it usually was.
Besides, there's no point if it's just going to take them from work. We're going to cure this thing. Of that, I'm 1,000,000,000% certain. Telling them now and having them worry is pointless, especially when everything's going to be fixed soon anyway. Worse, it's a distraction that we don't need right now when everyone should be working on the second phone. I need all my workers focused.
How very like Senkuu. Do you have an emotional response, only to go back and cover it as logic?
Senkuu, who gave out cotton candy to a girl far away from home and sold it as a strategy tactic. Senkuu, who claimed that guilt over leading the village to war was illogical, yet didn't even put up a fight when he thought they were selling him out to the enemy. Senkuu, who spoke about logic and probability and practicality and knew how to make gunpowder in a few hours, but wanted a bloodless war. Senkuu, who didn't want his friends to worry, but played it off like it was self-serving. Senkuu, who fell in love and treated it like a research project. It's not just romantic love that's lost. No, and Gen finally got it now. Because it had never been romantic love that drove Senkuu, not by far. Gen tried to picture a Senkuu without his love of science, his friends, his father, the village, and his dreams of space, and all he could come up with is something blank and cold. He'd never considered, but Senkuu really was made of the things he loved, wasn't he? And Gen had to wonder, if it wasn't for the disease, would Senkuu ever have said anything at all about his apparent crush? Gen thought that he knew the answer. No, not if Senkuu didn't see a benefit there. Not if he already knew Gen didn't feel the same way. Even for a mentalist, Senkuu was surprisingly adept at hiding how he felt.
How irritating and entertaining in equal measures.
What's with that face, mentalist? Senkuu interrupted his thoughts. Makes you look like you're plotting something stupid. But does it really? Well, it actually is nothing this time. Just thinking. Gen mulled it over before saying, I have a question, but you don't have to answer it. Sounds pretty pointless then. I swear you're difficult on purpose. An eye roll. That's the question. Fine.
Gen propped his head in his hand and examined Senkuu through his lashes.
You know, I'll admit, Senkuu-chan, before all this terrible flower business, I thought you were asexual, or I suppose somewhere on that continuum. And even with this, you still could be, of course. But are you?
And Senkuu
blushed. Time stopped. In fact, the world might have actually stopped turning and Gen wouldn't have noticed anything out of this observatory. He didn't even know Senkuu was capable of blushing. Theoretically, sure, but then again, if anyone could and would find a scientific preventative for normal physiological emotional indicators, it was him. Gen grinned. Oh, and it was a really terrible blush, too. Senku's lighter complexion didn't help anything when pale red bloomed up his neck and over his cheeks all the way up to his ears. The only pity was that it didn't last long. Like all things, Senkuu adapted quickly until all that was left was fading pink. Then he cleared his throat, speaking clearly, if slightly forced. Oh, no, I'm not.
And that was interesting.
Gen's grin lightened. Well, okay. Senkuu gave him an exacerbated look. Like, quit looking like that. It's not like it matters for this. Sure, Senkuu-chan, Gen said, and not like he was listening at all. Senkuu said, giving up the argument and laying back to ignore Gen instead. Anyway, Senkuu said pointedly, and apparently they were moving on. According to all the village elders, we're looking towards a long winter. We've still got the other cell tower to make, so that'll keep most of the village busy, plus the usual winter prep and a few smaller projects I might have thought of recently. Gen rolled his eyes. Of course you did. Senkuu continued, undaunted. But the good part is that theoretically they've already made one phone, so they should just need me around for monitoring and mixing a few chemicals. That'll give me enough time to move on to the big step of how we're figuring out this disease. He stretched back on the observatory floor. We're moving on from observation and preliminary research and starting on the main experimentation stage. And there was no way Gen was walking away from an opening like that. He made a show of gasping. Oh, is Senkuu-chan saying he wants to experiment with me? Senkuu rolled his eyes, turning back up to the stars with a faint smile, and sadly not a hint of a blush in sight. He really did it out too quickly, Gen bemoaned. Just go to sleep, mentalist.